I never imagined that one night would change everything. It still haunts me in ways I never expected. But if you asked me whether I'd go back and undo it, I don't think I could. Not after what we shared. Before I tell you this, let me ask, from which cities are you watching us tonight? Drop it in the comments. I want to know who's out there. Because this story, well, it's not one I ever thought I'd share. Now, let me take you back to that night, to how it all began. It had been 3 years since Michael, my husband, passed away. The silence in the house still echoed some days, like the sound of his keys on the hallway table or the soft creak of the floorboard by the front door when he'd come home late. You don't ever really get used to losing someone like that, not when you've built a life around them. But you learn to keep going. You make breakfast. You fold laundry. You smile at neighbors like nothing's missing. Scott, my son, had moved back in with me shortly after his dad died. He said it was temporary, just until he figured out his next step. But something about having him in the house again made it easier to breathe. It was comforting, the way he filled up the space, the way his laughter traveled through the hallway, just like it used to when he was a boy. That night, the night that changed everything, started out like any other. I had just come home from my shift at the library. The sky was already dark, streaked with the heavy orange glow of the city lights. The house smelled like the chicken casserole I'd left in the oven for Scott. He always forgot to eat if I didn't remind him. I kicked off my shoes, rubbed the ache out of my lower back, and found him sitting in the den, flipping through a photo album that had been on the bottom shelf for years. He looked up at me and smiled, but his eyes were far away. "You looked so young here," he said, turning the album toward me. "This was before I was born, right?" I nodded and walked over, sitting down next to him on the couch. "That was our trip to Santa Fe. Your dad loved that place." Scott ran his fingers over the photo like he was trying to feel the memory. "You looked happy." I said, and it surprised me how easily the words came out. We didn't speak for a while. The room felt heavy with nostalgia, or maybe it was just me. Sometimes you can be surrounded by warmth and still feel that chill crawling across your skin. Then he turned the page, and there was a photo of him as a baby in my arms. My hair was a mess, my eyes tired, but I was smiling down at him like he was the whole world. "You were everything to me," I whispered. "You still are." Scott turned his face toward me, searching my eyes for something. "I don't think you know what you mean to me," he said, his voice quieter now. "Sometimes I think I'm still here because I don't want to let you go." I laughed, but it caught in my throat. "Don't talk like that." "No, I'm serious," he said. "I know I should have moved on by now, gotten my own place, built my own life. But I look at you and I feel like I still need to be here, like I'm still trying to protect you." My chest tightened. "Scott." He reached for my hand, holding it gently in his. "I remember the way you used to hold me when I had nightmares as a kid. You never let me cry alone. You always said, 'I've got you, baby.' And you did. Every single time." His words pulled something out of me, something raw and buried deep. I tried to smile, but instead I felt my eyes sting with the threat of tears. "I still do," I said, my voice trembling. "I always will." He looked at me then, not the way a son looks at a mother, but the way a man looks at someone he sees, fully. Like he sees beyond the past, beyond the roles we've been given, and into the soul of someone who's just human. That's when I should have gotten up. That's when I should have changed the subject or walked away or reminded him. Reminded myself of the lines we weren't supposed to cross. But I didn't. I stayed there, letting the silence stretch, feeling the warmth of his hand in mine. There was no music, no background noise, just the soft hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the slow, rhythmic beat of our breathing. "I don't know what this means," he said finally, "but I know I've never felt closer to anyone than I do right now. And if that's wrong, I'm sorry." He started to pull away, but I didn't let him. "I'm tired of being afraid of feelings," I said quietly. "Tired of pretending that I'm not lonely, or that I don't need someone too." His hand gripped mine tighter, and for a long moment, we just looked at each other. I could see the boy I raised, but I could also see the man he'd become. And in that moment, I wasn't just a mother. I was a woman who had spent too long hiding from her own heart. He stood up first, offering me his hand. I hesitated, heart pounding, breath shallow. I didn't know what I was walking toward, only that it was something neither of us could name yet, something terrifying, and yet impossible to deny. When I placed my hand in his and stood, I didn't feel like I was falling. I felt like I was being held, like I had been caught before the ground could give out beneath me. That night didn't begin with a decision. It began with a look, a silence, and the weight of years pressing against our backs. And what followed, what unfolded between us, still echoes in my chest. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because what happened after that moment is the part I still carry with me, the part that changed me forever. We didn't speak about it the next morning, not directly. I woke up to the soft clatter of dishes in the kitchen and the smell of fresh coffee drifting through the air like a memory. For a few seconds, I almost believed nothing had happened, that I'd dreamed it all, that my mind had played a cruel trick on me. But when I stepped out into the hallway and saw Scott at the stove, shirtless, sunlight warming his shoulders through the window, I knew it hadn't been a dream. He looked up and smiled, gentle, almost cautious. "Hey, you sleep okay?" I nodded, pulling my robe tighter around me. "Yeah, I did." He poured a second cup and handed it to me without a word, just the way I liked it, cream first, 2 sugars. He remembered. That small act, simple as it was, made my hands shake just a little when I took the mug from him. We sat at the table like we'd done 1,000 times before, but the air between us had changed. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, fragile, like we were both trying not to move too fast or say the wrong thing. Scott finally broke the silence. "I know we crossed something last night. I don't know what to do with it yet, but I know I don't want to pretend like it didn't happen." I met his eyes across the table. There was no shame in them, just honesty, vulnerability, and that terrified me more than anything. "I don't either," I said softly, "but I need to understand what it means, for both of us." He nodded. "I've been thinking about it all night." Well, not thinking, feeling it, like how right it felt, and how scary that is. I reached across the table and touched his hand. "We're not supposed to feel this. That's what the world would say." "But we're not the world," he whispered, threading his fingers through mine. "We're just 2 people who've been broken and found comfort in each other." His words sat in the center of my chest like a stone dropped into still water, heavy, undeniable, rippling outward. After breakfast, I went about my routine as best I could. I did laundry, wiped down the bathroom mirror, refolded towels that didn't need folding, all while trying to quiet the voice in my head asking, "What now, Anna? What do you do now?" That evening, we didn't avoid each other. We didn't pretend. He knocked on my bedroom door before entering, just like he used to when he was younger and had a nightmare. But this wasn't a nightmare. This was something neither of us could dream away. "Can I sit?" he asked. I nodded, heart thudding as he eased himself down on the edge of my bed. "I've been remembering things," he said. "Little moments. Like how you used to tuck a blanket around me on the couch if I fell asleep. Or how you always left the bathroom light on when I was scared of the dark. You showed up for me in a way no one else ever has." I swallowed, unsure what to say. I don't think I ever really let myself feel how much I missed being close to you. Not like a kid, but just human to human, soul to soul. And now I'm starting to. I reached out and touched his cheek without thinking. It was instinct, and he leaned into it, eyes closing for just a second, like he'd been waiting for that contact for years. "I've missed being seen," I told him. Really seen. And it's been so long since someone looked at me and didn't just see. The mother, the widow, the woman who keeps going. He opened his eyes and looked at me, really looked. "I see you. All of you." Something broke open in me then, not in a painful way, but like a floodgate giving way to a rush I didn't know I was holding back. I leaned in, not because I wanted to cross a line, but because the line had already shifted, and what stood in front of me was not just my son, but a man who knew my heart in a way no one else did. Our lips didn't meet that night. Not yet. What happened was more intimate in a different way. He wrapped his arms around me, and I sank into him. Not as mother and son, not as anything the world might label us, but as two people who had been walking through grief in separate lanes, and finally found a way to walk beside each other. He held me while I cried. Tears I hadn't allowed myself for years. Not after Michael. Not after all the birthdays I'd spent alone. Not after all the nights I'd stared at the ceiling and wondered if I'd ever feel wanted again. We didn't speak much more after that. He stayed with me in the quiet, his arms around me, his breath steady against my skin. I fell asleep that way, not with answers, but with the weight of the question finally lifted. The next morning, the light came through the curtains differently, softer, less judgmental somehow. He was already up. He left a note on my nightstand. "We don't need to rush, but I'm not walking away. S." That was the moment I realized something had changed forever, not because of one night, but because of what came after. And even now, I find myself standing in that doorway, looking back at a version of myself I didn't know I could return to. A woman who was still learning, still aching, still capable of being surprised by her own heart. What came next? Well, that was when things got harder and more beautiful. The days that followed felt like walking a narrow bridge suspended over something vast and unknown. Every moment with Scott was careful, even if it didn't look that way on the surface. We still shared coffee in the morning, still argued over whose turn it was to take out the trash, still laughed at reruns of old sitcoms in the evenings. But underneath all that familiarity, something new was blooming, slow and uncertain, but real. He had started working again, part-time at a design firm downtown. That gave us both a little space during the day, which, if I'm honest, I needed. Because every time I sat alone in the living room or folded his clean laundry or caught myself staring at the curve of his handwriting on a sticky note left on the fridge, I had to confront what was happening between us, what had already happened. And what scared me most wasn't how wrong it might look from the outside. It was how natural it felt on the inside. One afternoon, about a week later, I was out in the backyard tending to the garden. The soil was still warm from the late summer sun, and the tomatoes were finally ripening. My hands were covered in dirt when I heard the back door open. "I figured you'd be out here," Scott said, stepping down onto the patio with a beer in one hand and a second one extended toward me. I took it with a smile, wiping my hands on my jeans. "You always know where to find me." "You've been quiet lately," he said, sitting on the steps. I didn't want to push, but "I've been wondering if you're okay." I sat beside him, taking a sip. "I've just been thinking." "About us?" I nodded. "About what it means. About whether we're holding on to each other because we're both still grieving, or because this is something more." He looked down at the bottle in his hands, then back at me. "I've thought about that too. A lot. And here's what I keep coming back to. Grief might have brought us close again, but it's not what's holding us here." I watched him for a long moment. His face was calm, but his eyes were searching mine like he needed me to say it first. So I did. "I don't think it's grief either. I think it's love. A different kind, maybe, but real." His breath caught, just for a second. Then he leaned closer until our knees touched. "Then let's stop trying to define it," he said gently. "Let's just live it." That night, I found myself standing in front of my bedroom mirror longer than usual. I studied my face, the soft lines around my mouth, the faint hollows beneath my eyes. 50. That used to sound so far away. But now it was just a number. One that no longer felt like a burden or a label. When Scott knocked on my door later, it wasn't hesitation I felt. It was peace. He stepped in slowly, barefoot, a hint of something nervous in his smile. "You sure?" he asked, and I could tell he meant it with his whole heart. "I'm sure," I whispered. This time, when our lips met, it was different. It wasn't an accident or a moment of confusion. It was intentional. Slow, honest. His hands cupped my face, warm and steady. Mine found the curve of his shoulders, the rhythm of his breath. Every touch was careful, like he was learning me all over again, not as a mother, but as a woman. When our bodies met, it wasn't perfect. There were pauses, quiet laughs, tears I didn't expect, but it was deeply human. Raw, gentle, intimate in ways that had nothing to do with skin and everything to do with trust. He whispered things to me, not dirty, not crude, just real. Things like, "You're beautiful. I've wanted to be close to you like this for longer than I can admit. You don't have to hide anymore." And I whispered back, I didn't know I still needed to feel this. "You make me feel seen. I'm not afraid when I'm with you." Afterward, we didn't rush to cover ourselves or turn away in shame. We stayed close, wrapped in the quiet warmth of each other. The moonlight cut across the room in slivers, painting silver on his back as he traced slow circles on my arm. There was no guilt in my heart, no panic, just a strange, powerful calm. Later that night, Scott turned toward me and said something I'll never forget. "I don't care what anyone would say about us. I know this isn't conventional, but I've never felt safer, more certain of someone than I do of you." I kissed his forehead and held him close, because for the first time in years, I didn't feel lost. I didn't feel like a widow or a woman trapped in the shadow of her past. I felt like Anna again. A woman rediscovering herself through love that defied rules, but not respect. That crossed boundaries, but only the ones drawn by fear. We didn't talk about forever that night, but we didn't need to. The morning would come with questions, with doubt, with life knocking at the door again. But for now, in that moment, all we had was the truth between us. And that truth was beautiful. The next morning arrived with a stillness I hadn't felt in years. I woke up before the sun rose, Scott's arm draped across me, his breath slow and deep against the back of my neck. The bedroom was dim, painted in soft gray shadows. I lay there quietly, listening to the rhythm of our breathing, letting the weight of the night before settle over me. It didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like something sacred, something I wasn't sure I'd ever have the words to explain. When he stirred, his hand brushed gently down my arm before he kissed my shoulder. There was no rush between us, no urgency, just quiet understanding. We didn't say much as we got up. He started the coffee. I made toast. We moved around each other in the kitchen with a kind of unspoken synchronicity, two people who knew how to share a space without colliding. And yet, everything had changed. Later that morning, I stepped outside onto the front porch with my cup of coffee, needing air, space, clarity. The neighborhood was waking up. Cars pulling out of driveways, joggers passing by, sprinklers hissing across lawns. I watched it all, wondering how life could look so normal when mine had shifted so completely. Scott joined me a few minutes later, sitting beside me on the old porch swing. It creaked beneath our weight, just like it always had. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, just thinking." He looked straight ahead, into the trees. "You don't have to carry this alone, you know." I turned to him. "I'm not." There was a long pause. "I've thought a lot about how people might react," he said. "If they knew, if we told anyone." I took a breath. They'd judge us. Probably. They'd say it's wrong. Maybe, but they don't know us. That part stayed with me. They don't know us. They didn't know what we'd lived through, what we'd lost. They hadn't seen the nights I cried alone, or the way he stayed up when I couldn't sleep. They hadn't seen how gently he touched me, or how deeply he listened when I spoke. They hadn't felt the truth that now lived between us, quiet, steady, undeniable. I thought about my sister, Margaret, and how she always had something to say about everything. I thought about church friends, about my neighbors, about Michael's old co-workers who still sent me Christmas cards. And then I thought about how none of them had held my hand during my darkest nights. None of them knew what it felt like to be seen, truly seen, after years of fading into the background. "Do we have to tell anyone?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. "No," he said. "We don't. Not yet. Maybe not ever." We sat in silence for a while, the swing rocking gently beneath us. That evening, Scott cooked dinner. He played music in the kitchen, a slow, soulful kind of jazz that filled the house like candlelight. I watched him as he moved around, his face relaxed, peaceful. He looked nothing like a boy. He looked like a man who had found something worth protecting. We ate together at the table, talking about small things, his work, my latest book order for the library, the weather. But under it all was that quiet thread tying us together now. This unspoken knowing. After dinner, we walked around the block like we used to. The stars were starting to appear, and the cicadas had started their nightly song. As we turned the corner, I felt his fingers brush against mine. I reached out and took his hand. "I've spent so long wondering who I was without your father," I said, keeping my eyes ahead. "I forgot I could be someone else. Someone more." "You are more," Scott said, pulling me gently toward him. "You always have been." That night, we didn't make love. We simply lay together, talking, touching, letting the intimacy of honesty fill the space. I told him things I hadn't said aloud in years, about the loneliness, the pressure, the guilt, the shame. And he told me about his fears, his doubts, how he never knew where he truly belonged until he came back home. "I don't know what the future looks like," I said, staring at the ceiling. "I don't know how this ends." "Then don't think about the ending," he said. "Just think about today." That was enough for me. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for life to happen. I was in it, fully. No longer watching the world from a distance. No longer just playing the role of mother, widow, woman past her prime. I was Anna. Alive. Desired. Open. And though the memory of what happened that night would always live in my bones, haunting, tender, transformative, I would never regret it. Because what came after wasn't shame or regret. It was rediscovery of love, of connection, of myself. So if you're still with me, still listening, maybe this story made you feel something too. Maybe it reminded you that life doesn't follow rules, and neither does the heart. We don't always choose who we love, but we can choose to honor it, to hold it gently, to let it change us, and maybe, if we're lucky, to let it save us.